Hey folks, David Stewart here. Welcome to the Writestream. Today we're just going to talk about a bunch of publishing topics because I didn't have really anything special in mind. One of the things I will probably do live is publish a book on Amazon, so I'll show you how to do that today. So if anybody's like, I want to see you do it, I've done videos on it, like here's me doing it step by step, so we can just do that live and I'll show you everything that you might want to know to do that, to put a book that you already have up on Amazon. As far as other topics go, there's a million little topics, and the big ones that I wanted to cover today are really just sort of the conventional ways that you publish books, whether you're going to go, quote, the traditional route, which really is like the corporate or 20th century route, using conventional large or small publishers and distribution into physical bookstores and their whole distribution network. Or you're going to do some variety of independent publishing. Independent publishing really just means you're not using a publisher who's going to manage all the stuff for you and are going to do all of that stuff yourself. And there's pros and cons to each path you might want to choose. As far as if you were a writer starting out, there's no real downside anymore, I think, to publishing things independently. I think a couple years ago, there were people who believed like you would never be able to get a traditional publishing deal if you were doing things independently, or even like, you know, maybe like small press or one of these other kinds of things. I don't know if that's the case anymore. But I think for a lot of new writers, if you can get what I might call a traditional publishing deal, it's probably beneficial because you have no presence online. You have no audience yet. So if you don't have an audience, it's rather difficult to just sell books independently. The thing that's always missing from everybody talking about independent publishing is, how do you build an audience? How do you find that audience? How do you like cultivate an audience? Hopefully without spending your whole life savings. Because the truth is, you're either going to be buying an audience, or you're going to be building an audience, or you're going to build an audience by buying it. Some combination thereof. Or you're going to rent it, like you're going to pay somebody to email their mailing list about your book and things like that. It takes a long time to build up an audience. So I'll give you some tips on how to do that without breaking the bank. And even if you want to break the bank, like how would you go about doing that? If you just had 30 grand sitting around that you wanted to spend on marketing a book, how would you go about doing that? I'm not like an expert in that, but I could direct you into like how you would do that and how you might want to hire people. Personally, if I had just a bunch of money to burn on marketing, I don't think I'd spend any time myself learning how to run A/B ad testing, all that crap. I would just hire someone to do it because it's just not what I want to spend my time doing. And that's one of the downsides to independent publishing is, since you're doing everything, that's all of your time and energy going to do those things, but also to build up the knowledge for how to do them. So if there's parts of this that you don't really enjoy for its own sake, then you're going to end up having to spend money to have someone else do that for you because you're the publisher. And publishers take risks when they are publishing other authors, right? So if you are with some publisher, they're taking a risk by publishing your book. So they're taking on the risk. That's why they get a bigger percentage of the reward, right? People will talk about, if you're independent, you're going to get 70% ebook royalties. If you're traditionally published, it's going to be 15% and you have to pay your agent out of that, right? That's a big difference. So you'll be making a lot less per book. That's why a lot of artists or a lot of writers never end up doing what's called recouping. That is to say, they never actually earn back the advance that they get. They get an advance on their royalties. That's not just money that they give you. They don't just write you a check that you get, here's the money, we bought your book. No. You won't earn another dime in royalties until you earn out of your portion that much money. So if it's a $10,000 advance, let's say you like $10,000 now is a huge amount for an advance. was not unheard of in the 90s. But like in the 90s, it wasn't unheard of for certain big authors to get really big advances. You know, so if you get a $10,000 advance, that means you have to earn back $10,000 worth of royalties before you see another dime of royalties. And most artists never earn that back. And if you don't earn out, then it's really hard to negotiate a good advance for the next book, or even to get the next book published, because they'll be like, we put out a book, it was a dud, never earned back, we lost money on it. Now, they may not have lost money on it, they may have actually broken even, but you didn't recoup, which means that they're not really making a lot of money on it, because their portion of the royalties has to pay for the cover, the marketing, the printing. They take a risk by making the physical book. And though they can write off all the books that aren't sold as a tax loss, they burn them, they turn them into toilet paper, they recycle them, and then take them as a tax write-off. So they're not at a huge risk for printing books, believe it or not. But even with that, the publisher's taking the risk. So let's start with the first one. What does it mean to be traditionally published or conventional publishing? That means that you have someone like Tor, Penguin, Random House, whatever, Houghton Mifflin, whatever the publisher is. They are a company that will do all of the stuff. You give them a manuscript and you work with them to polish that manuscript with their in-house editors, usually. They do the typesetting, they do the proofreading, they do the printing, they do the distribution, they do most of the marketing. They'll even book book signings for you for like a marketing tour, which a lot of authors who haven't done this are like, oh yeah, book signing. It's like, man, I don't want to go on a book tour. I have kids, you know, I want to stay home with my kids. Can I live stream into the bookstore? Right? So I don't have to go down there and sign books. Or it's like, I would feel like guilty going to a book signing for like my books and just be like, I guess I'm going to sign books. I'm like, I'm going to bring a guitar and you guys I'll play a gig for you guys. You guys want a recital? I'll just play a 1-hour guitar recital. No signing books. Anyway, so they do all that stuff. All that stuff costs a lot of money. How do you get them to do that? Well, the way that you do it is that you have to query agents. You actually can't talk to publishers. So if you can't just like call up Tor and be like, I have a book you guys should publish. You maybe could if you were like really huge. If you're Brandon Sanderson, you could probably call up Tor. But even then, he's probably going to work with an agent so that there's some contract management and things like that going on. But yeah, if you're Brandon Sanderson, you can call up Tor. But you know, most people can't. So you use an agent. You query the agent. Would you like to rep my book? Would you like to represent my book? What does that mean? Well, they agree to take on the task of getting your book published. They're going to rep it to publishers, which means they're going to use their interpersonal connections with publishers to say, here's a book, and they're going to sell the book to the publisher. And it's through the agent that the publisher is even going to take a look at it and consider it. Right? Now, that middleman seems somewhat parasitic on the outside, right? And it kind of is, but they're also working for free on the front end to hopefully earn their royalties on the back end. It's mostly just an extra step that you have to go through to do that. Like it or hate it, you might think it's parasitic, you might think it's evil, whatever your opinions about it is, that's what you have to do. How do you find an agent? There's a bunch of ways. So there are listed agents on the Science Fiction Writers Association of America website. Now, I'm not a fan of SWFA, Science Fiction and Fantasy Writers Association now, right? It used to be just Science Fiction Writers Association. Anyway, I'm not a fan of them, SFWA, as far as like who runs it, I guess, and some of the people that are in it, like Patrick Tomlinson. They apparently they paid his $100,000 legal bill out of authors' contributions to the guild. Wait. Anyway, but they do have a list of agents, so you can go down that list. You write a query letter. I'm not going to go deep into it. You can just Google query letters. There's also one on Writer Beware. We'll have some, which is like a blog on SWA. And so you can get a format for a query letter from them, or just find someone else that'll have a format for it. Basically be like, dear agent, I am so-and-so, and I have this book that's this in this genre. Then you have a middle paragraph that'll be Selling the book, it's like your blurb, it's your log line. This book is this combination of these genre elements with this kind of character that does this. It's all marketing jargon, so you have to get that in your mind, even if you're doing trad published stuff, because you have to know how to sell the book to an agent. They're going to take that information and they're going to use it to sell it to a publisher. And then it's like, then at the end, you're going to list any other books that you published and anything else you might be known for. So I would list, I've published 20 books independently, including all of these books, including these bestsellers, right? And I have a social media following of 50,000 people. That's important now. It wouldn't have been important 10 years ago because they weren't thinking like that. But now they're like, wait, this person can actually help market the book, because marketing sucks now. It's really hard. And yeah, so you would put that on there, and then respectfully awaiting your reply, so-and-so. And then that agent might have on his website or whatever, might ask for the first 10 pages of the manuscript, or from there, like a 1 or 2 page treatment. What a treatment is a summary. If you saw my stream on planning, the planning document, the way that I write a planning document, this happens, this happens, this happens. That's almost like a treatment. It's just like a short summation of what's in the book, like a summary of the plot and those sorts of things. Okay, so that's what you do. Send it off. Send it to a bunch of agents. Maybe they pick it up. Okay. Another way to find agents is find books that are really similar to yours and go get them and look at them and see if the agent is mentioned anywhere in it. A lot of times an author will thank his agent. Sometimes the agent will be listed somewhere else in the book as a special thanks, or like in the front matter or something. Find the name of that agent, figure that out, send them a query letter, because they know how to sell books like yours. So if you have a book that's like a Jim Butcher book, you would try to query Jim Butcher's agent. And maybe they ignore you, maybe they say not interested, and you just deal with that. And maybe you haven't written a good enough book yet for an agent to care. They look at the first page and they're like, boring, next. That's okay, keep writing books. Okay, and you can always take that book and do it independently if no one wants to publish it. Okay, so I'm mentioning that because people are always like, how do I get traditionally published? Like, that's the way you traditionally publish novels. If you're doing nonfiction, it's a totally different thing, because you'll be in a couple of different streams with nonfiction. One is an academic stream, like if you are publishing with an academic press like Stanford or something like that, a textbook, or a specific academic work. Like if you're doing a work on the forced expulsion of the Volga Germans under Tsarist and then communist Russia during these years leading up to World War II or something, right? So if you're writing a book on that, that's a really specific history topic, right? That would be an academic history survey and secondary work. You would actually end up talking to an academic press about that, and they would do it that way. If you are doing a book that is like a diet book, you might need an agent, but chances are you can just talk to publishers that do that kind of stuff, especially if you were like a celebrity trainer or something like that, then you probably wouldn't need an agent for that. But for novels, that's the way that you're going to end up doing that. Okay, so good luck to you if you're going to do that. This, a lot of this comes from experience, although my experience now is about 10 years old as far as querying agents. One of the reasons that I am published independently, and I'll go pull the book down. This book is why. Whoa, I'm dropping all the books. Oh no, the books are falling off my shelf. Hey, a book fell off my shelf. You could buy it. It's called Kyrie. It's written by my friend Matt Krotz and drawn by him. Great art, great style, great author. It's this book, Muramasa Blood Drinker. Okay, this is a genre which doesn't exist, even though Shogun is very popular, and I should do some content on the Shogun series, the new one, so that I can sell my samurai book. But genre doesn't exist. Talk to some agents. Hey, this seems like a cool book. There's no one who will buy it because this is not a genre that exists and no one will want to publish this. Oh, okay. It's not. I'm like kind of like fantasy genre. It's historical fiction. Supernatural murder mystery and demons and stuff. That's not really a genre. So I published it independently, and it has its fan base. There's people who really love it. Anytime some kind of samurai thing comes out, I end up selling a bunch more copies just kind of naturally because people are looking for more samurai fiction, right? They're like, Neo came out, and then people were buying the book. Neo 2 came out, people were buying the book. Ghost of Tsushima came out, and then like I saw an uptick of the book because people get into a game and they're like, well, I want more literature, but I don't want Shogun because I just don't want, I've already read it, or it's just not, I want action. It's like, that's an action, this is an adventure novel, right? Okay. That's how I found out about a lot of that. Anyway, that's how you would get traditionally published. And you might get in advance, and it might be big, it might be small. If you're starting out, you'll probably just take whatever you can get. And the publisher will have the rights to your book for a certain amount of time. If they let it fall out of print, this will be part of the contract for a certain number of years. The number I've seen pop up is either 5 or 7. So if it's out of print for 7 years, the rights revert back to you, which means you can publish it with another publisher, or you can publish it independently, or whatever you want to do. This was a topic I covered with John Norman and the Novels of Gore, where his books were out of print because the publisher chose not to print them. They chose not to print them because the publisher didn't like them. Not because they didn't sell, but because the publisher didn't like the content of the books, thought they were sexist. Because they had like women who liked to be slaves. It was kind of like a master dominant sexual thing, even though like, especially the first book, Tarnsman of Gore, it's not like super explicit, right? With that kind of thing, but it is part of like, there's like a fetish element to it. And John Norman, I guess that's his pen name. I don't remember his real name, but like he used to give like lectures on how to have that in your personal life and it being good. Anyway, my point is that happened to him, is that it went out of print and he had to wait for years to get the rights back to publish them independently and continue making money. And the used copies, the value went up on them because you couldn't buy a copy of Tarnsman of Gore. They just weren't around. You can only get them at a used bookstore. And there were a lot printed back in the 1970s, so they weren't that hard to find. But that's a risk, right? Is that it could go out of print and then you can't make any money on it. If it doesn't recover and they just stop printing it, you got to wait years to try to print it yourself. Unless, and then I've heard this too, is that you can ask the publisher, like, if your book bombs, can I have my rights back so I can independently publish it? And they may do that, right? It's their option to let you out of the contract for that kind of stuff. Little comment on, not a lot of people watching today, it's okay. Versus book covers. People are always like excited to talk and learn about book covers. Maybe not as much for just random publishing topics because it doesn't matter. All right. They're a little more bright. Now you can see my face. I think in the last few years, people are realizing that social media following numbers don't necessarily translate to sales, like the Lindsay Ellis book series that flopped. That's a really good point. So they can. There's really, here's how you have to think about how social media translates to sales. Is it's a built-in audience. It's an audience that already likes the author for some reason and is willing to buy a product from that author simply because they like him, because they already like the stuff that author is already doing. So if it's a big YouTuber, or if it's someone that's big on TikTok or Twitter, they'll buy that book kind of as a means of supporting that person. And I think that this happens a lot with political stuff. So you can be Matt Walsh and have a big social media following and put out a terrible children's book that people will buy simply because they like the things that you say on social media. So what are you doing? The book is actually part of a monetization strategy for the social media following. People get upset when I mention this, but the Rippaverse stuff, the ISOM stuff with Eric July, this is nothing against him. But I have not seen anything that I would consider to be of good quality regarding his comics. They're just not drawn well with good stories, right? I don't think they're very good. Now, you may love them, and that's great. I haven't had anybody really tell me why I should be buying them other than Eric July is based, which is like, I like Eric July, so I'll buy his product. That's an acceptable reason to buy him, right? It's like Eric July is doing important cultural work. Therefore, I'm going to buy his product to support him, right? I have a Patreon. You can support me on Patreon. I have a Ko-Fi. You can support me on Ko-Fi. I have books for sale. You can support me by buying those books. I don't really care why you buy them. You might buy them because you like me. There's nothing wrong with that, in my opinion. But that's where a lot of those sales are going to come from a big YouTuber or a big social media personality. It doesn't necessarily translate into sales, though. Just because somebody is a big figure, like what's her name, Ilhan Omar, who's a politician, a Muslim politician here in the United States, put out a book, got a huge advance. Nobody bought the book. Why? Because the people who like her politics don't read books and don't care about buying books. They aren't baby boomers. Right? It's like buying a book by a politician is something that was really popular with the older generations. Younger generations, even if it's Barack Obama, they probably don't care about buying a book from him. They don't really care what he has to say in a book. It's just not very interesting to them. It's not that they don't read anything, but what they choose to read is just different. They're just different interests with different generations. That's how it is. Zoomers like light novels. They're not interested in the George R.R. Martin like door stoppers. That's how it's okay, right? I have no judgment against that. So that's the thing. If you have a good social media following, it's a built-in audience to market the book to. And so if you're a publisher, that's attractive because it's like lots of people may buy this book simply because of who wrote it, because of the power of the personality and who wrote it. However, a publisher is still going to work a lot on that manuscript to make it good enough that people will like the book in most cases, right? And that's going to be, they're going to edit it. They're going to hire a good editor or maybe even a ghostwriter. Okay. A lot of books by, say, politicians, you've got a ghostwriter or a really elite editor that's working with that person to really for them to write the book rather than the person whose name is on the cover. Did Barack Obama write his own book? Well, I will not going to say yay or nay. However, I have talked to some people who very convincingly pointed out that he likely did not write his own books, but they were ghostwritten by another person that he worked with, right? He's not an author. And they showed some samples that's comparative, right? I think it's pretty standard practice to employ editors that are ghostwriters or just ghostwriters when you have a celebrity author. That's a common thing. Yeah, Albert says, harder to sell a book to people who don't care about books and or hate spending money. Yeah. So the audience has to be a little bit interested in what's there, but the main thing is the power of the personality. Like, what percentage of Eric July's audience really cares about comic books? Probably almost none, because almost nobody cares about comic books. I look at the numbers for like Marvel and DC, and they're good for, there are indie comics that outsell them, but not by that much, right? They still sell copies, but nothing like what they sold in the 80s, right? Marvel used to sell 100,000 copies of every title every month, and sometimes 1 million copies of certain titles like Spider-Man and X-Men, the really popular ones, every month. So if you realize that like Marvel was moving 12 million Spider-Man books every year, 12 to 15 million X-Men books every year, selling 5,000 copies of the newest Miles Morales gay Spider-Man is not very impressive, right? So the truth is that audience grew out of comic books, stopped reading them. No one really cares about comics. People will buy the comics, though, just that they like the personality, and they're like, well, maybe I stopped reading comics because they're too gay. Maybe I stopped reading comics because the art got bad or the stories got bad. Maybe this will be a better one. So there might be an element of that too. I'm not saying it's like going to be completely one way or the other. But the main thing is that is a monetization product. It's the same as a t-shirt. Okay. You can buy t-shirts of mine. They're usually like somewhere below a video. There'll be a thing of like Scipio and Zool t-shirts. And I'm going to maybe expand the merchandise thing in case people want to buy shirts. Now, shirt is a thing you wear. It has use, but the logo on the shirt is really about your attachment to the person that's there. If it's a Zool shirt or it's a Scipio shirt or something like that. I'm going to do a Caesar shirt too, I think. Which I meant to do like a Scipio, a Caesar, a Sulla, like an Augustus, Constantine, all of those. But just a bunch of different, Vespasian, a bunch of different Roman emperors that I think are cool, and Roman statesmen. Maybe I'll go back and do that. Does James Patterson actually write his own books? That's a good question. I don't know. Because James Patterson is a fiction writer, he probably does. The people who I think don't write their own books are actually not the James Pattersons. They're like the indie fiction writers. I think I talked about, who did I talk about? He's so unimportant I can't remember his name, and everybody already forgot the controversy over the fact that he plagiarized a bunch of books. I think his plagiarism was unintentional. He copied lines out of really popular books. And I think it was unintentional because what he probably did was hire ghostwriters who did that. And he just didn't realize they had done that, because most people don't remember random lines out of books. Unless they're like, the man in black fled across the desert, right? Unless they're really, he was evil and sentimental. Like the lines that really pop out of books, most people remember those, but they don't remember they remember it was the best of times, it was the worst of times. They don't remember like a random prose description from page 420. They just don't remember that stuff. So I think it might have been unintentional, and because he hired ghostwriters. And that's because indie fiction guys will put out like 20 books a year. Now, it's possible for you to write 20 books a year if you're doing that full time. But they're also marketing. They spend most of their time selling courses to other authors, author services. So they're pretty busy, and you kind of start to listen to their comments. And what you realize that they want to do is like, I want to work with a co-author. What they mean is, I want a ghostwriter to write this. I'm going to come up with a plot outline that fits into like my series, and then I'll just pay a ghostwriter to write it, because my time is better spent selling author services and advertising books. And they start to think that their big ideas about the story are like super important, when it comes down to execution is what really matters. But if you have a 10-book series, by the time you get to book 10, the quality of the book doesn't matter as much. So I'll talk about like the indie fiction format, like the standard way that indie fiction is supposed to operate. It's not the way I do it, and it's not the way that you need to do it either, but I will talk about the standard way of doing it. So I think a lot of indie fiction writers are pretty happy to use ghostwriters, or have co-authors, which are really just ghostwriters writing their plot outline for whatever part in the series. And if you're at book 10 in a series, the audience is already hooked. They've bought through 9 books. You have to write really bad books, and often several of them in a row, before readers will quit a series that they love. That's true. Think of Wheel of Time. Wheel of Time had like 4 bad books all in a row, and people still didn't stop reading the series just because of how much they loved the first 3 books. By the time they get to book 7, 8, 9, 10, I think those are the 4. Those are the stinkers in Wheel of Time. And then it starts to pick up in like book 11. And then Brandon Sanderson finishes the series, and those are pretty good. The first 3 books are good. Then they kind of start to dip, and then they get boring as hell for 4 whole volumes and nothing, and then it gets good for like 4 or 5 books at the end, right? Fans will stick with it. They'll stick through garbage for a long time. So yeah, if you're going to have somebody ghostwrite and you're on like volume 8 of your 30-book series, yeah, chances are people aren't even going to notice the style difference. So that's what a lot of indie writers were doing. And I noticed as soon as like ChatGPT was cresting, a lot of them were talking about, how do I use AI to write all my books for me? How can I go from ghostwriting 20 books a year to AI writing 100 books a year and selling all of them? And it's like, and I'll have AI make the cover. It's like, okay, you don't actually like writing books at that point. You're looking entirely as a way to like extract money from people and fool them into buying something. There's no artistic stamp on that at all at that point. It's not even your idea that another person's executing. It is just tell a robot, here's my outline, make a story out of it. Here you go, master. It's not even like, you're not even commissioning an artist at that point. Pretty bad stuff. Anyway, let's take a look at the chat, and then I'll talk about the standard model for indie fiction. I talked about the standard model for traditional publishing. So Marvel and DC aren't selling comics that comic nerds want to buy these days. I think comic nerds do, but the comic nerds are the only people that are left. All the normies have quit, and the comics nerds are people that probably would hate everybody that liked comics in 1991. There you go. How well do larger graphic novels do compared to comic books these days from what you've noticed? One-off graphic novels. I have no idea. I think for like indie stuff, they might do okay. Like Matt Krotz's book here. Maybe he's watching on Twitter. Probably not. I like Matt a lot. And I like his books. My son likes them too. They're fun. They're kind of like heist books, but in maybe the 3rd century? I'm trying to remember. Anyway, I don't think they do that great. They do okay, but there's not like a huge inbuilt market for complete graphic novels. Manga does okay. I think for indie comics guys, their big thing to sell are graphic novels or like just bigger books, because you do this whole crowdfunding thing like their model has to do with. You crowdfund up a bunch of money and then you delay publishing it for 3 years and then finally ship it to people and it's garbage. That's a comics game model. Anyway, yeah, for the like indie comics model, it's to sell bigger books because that's just more efficient than trying to do a monthly. Like the whole idea of a monthly periodical doesn't fit modern. It doesn't fit the modern indie market really very well at all. It's a lot to do. It's expensive. It's more expensive to print. If you divide this up into 6 issues, it'd be more expensive to print and ship those 6 issues by like 500% than to ship this. So it's much more efficient to just ship a graphic novel by a lot. You can look this up with all your printers if you want, but it's like there's a minimum cost per unit no matter what. So you're incentivized to have bigger and longer books. Physically bigger and longer will be the more price efficient way to do it. So with that in mind, as long as you're crowdfunding, you want to crowdfund a bigger, thicker book that you have to ship less often to pay lower shipping costs and lower printing costs. Everything is just much, much cheaper when you do it that way. So that's where I think it's a good indie fiction model. But I don't know how well they do just on the general market. Most of the graphic novels you see that are like superheroes are actually collections of periodicals from like the 90s, like the Frank Miller stuff. You might get one that's like The Death of Superman, which is actually a collection of like 12 periodicals. Like it or hate it, that's what it is. So I don't think they do great, but they do okay. There's a lot of benefit to doing them if you're doing them independently, though. Greetings, Eloise. What if authors rewrote each other's books the way singers cover each other's songs? Like Ulysses. James Joyce did that. It's the most abandoned book of all time, I think, is Ulysses by James Joyce. Why does comic book writing feel worse than other mediums? Okay. Why does comic book writing feel worse than other mediums? I have a few answers. The first one is lower talent. No one who writes comic books is going to want to hear this, but comic book writers are pretty much the bottom of the barrel as far as talent goes. And I do that judging based off the output. So if I look at someone and their writing credits are comic books, then I know they're probably the worst writers. And then one step up from them is screenwriters. Novelists, I'm saying this as a novelist, novelists are the best writers. You have to think about the product that's there, right? The comic book, most of the work is being done by the visuals. The artist is doing a lot of the heavy lifting as far as the appeal of the product goes. Classically, comic books were marketed towards children. Therefore, a simpler, more direct, less obtuse writing style or a more obtuse writing style, that is preferable, right? You want maybe or less obtuse, more acute, right? Like more direct. That's what you want. You want it to be really easy to understand because it's marketed towards children. So people who grew up reading that, all of their input into their synthesizer, right? We have a big synthesizer up here for language. All of their input was things written for young audiences, written for children. No prose to read, no quotes to have to deal with. It's just speech bubbles, saying directly things, really direct storytelling with cool looking pictures. So people who grew up reading comics and then choose to write comics, they just have a lesser pool of knowledge to synthesize new things. This is why they don't tend to escape from that medium unless it is to really bork up another medium like the Castlevania show, which one of the ways that you know that the Castlevania show was going to be terribly written is that the lead writer was a comic book writer from like Marvel and DC or something, right? So if there's a comic book writer on staff, you know it's probably going to suck. They're just the least talented people. And that's just how it works. It's like which musical artist is going to have the lowest musical knowledge and produce the lowest quality music if you ask them to? Think about it for a second. Everybody's going to come up with the same answer. They're going to be like, oh yeah, it's a hip-hop artist. Why? Think about what they grew up listening to. Little clips of like pop music and 808 drum machine loops and things like that. Like things that are not musically complex other than maybe how, like complex hi-hat rhythms or something. There's just not a lot to it. So their pool of knowledge, their inputs for the synthesis machine are just really deficient. So most comic book writers have a really deficient input base. They haven't read enough novels. They can't write prose. So if you're going to write a novel, you have to be good at dialogue. You have to be good at prose. You have to be good at the big story elements, setting, characters, and plot. And you have to be able to manage all of those things in a book to pace it well, to not bore a reader, and communicate maybe all the deeper things that a reader's expecting out of a good novel, like theme and all that kind of crap. So novelists are the highest tier because they have to write in so many different... We have to write prose that's interesting. We have to describe things in a way that makes people able to visualize them. Comic book writers don't have to do that. And chances are they grew up loving a medium that never does that, that just shows it directly rather than describing it to you. So their quality's lower, right? And the fact is that comic book writing doesn't pay very well. So if you wanted to make more money as a writer, you would want to do something other than writing comics. You'd want to be a screenwriter, which pays more money. Still doesn't pay very much money. You'd really want to be a hit novelist if you can manage it. That pays the most money. Of course, most novelists are like completely broke, and even if their books are really good, they never make any money on them. But that's also true with comic books, so take it or leave it. So that's why comic books, I think, tend to have the worst writing of all media. I'd say bottom is comic books. Next step up is probably screen or video games. Video game writing tends to be pretty bad. On average. And then most screenwriting's pretty bad, but there are some absolute awesome gems, right? There's garbage, save the cat stuff, and then there's amazing screenwriting. There's there's Charlie Kaufman, and then there's Blake Snyder. I know Blake Snyder's dead, but he wrote Save the Cat, so I blame him for all the bad screenwriting. I blame him for all bad screenwriting for the past 30 years. I blame Blake Snyder. Blake Snyder was actually not that bad, but people taking advice from Blake Snyder intentionally make their writing terrible. They were never probably very good to begin with. So, and then the top tier is going to be the best novelists, right? George R.R. Martin, as much as you may fault him for laziness, as much as you may dislike the prurient nature of his books, the dude can write. The dude knows how to write prose, and he knows how to nail characters and descriptions in a way that you will remember them. You're going to remember the kid like breastfeeding when he's too old from the mother up in that castle in the first book. You're going to remember, even as gross as it is, you're going to remember Daenerys like crapping herself to death. You remember even the most prurient things because he's that good at writing, right? He's just better than most screenwriters are going to be. And people who are fans of the book are like, the book is so much better than the series because you handed it to screenwriters and they're like, I'm going to do my screenwriter bit and just make it worse because I'm just not as good a writer as a novelist. Let's be honest. My skills aren't as high. I'm just writing dialogue and description that a director needs to turn into visuals. You're not really writing anything that has to be interesting outside of the dialogue space. Maybe that's controversial opinions. That's fine. That's fine. It's more challenging by far, because I've written screenplays too. It's more challenging by far to write a novel than a screenplay. Anyway, not to say all comic writing is bad. So people always do this. So I'm just going to clear the air with it, right? There are some great written comic books. There are some great written video games. I'm saying on average. Go pick up a random Marvel comic. It's probably going to be garbage. You know, people, this writer from Marvel's bad. It's like, yeah, they don't have anything else. Like they can't make money. They have a good gig, and so they're going to stick with it. All right. Anyway, that's my long explanation on why comic book writers are not as good. There seems to be a failed young adult book author to game writer pipeline these days. Obsidian Entertainment is filled with them, and their RPG stories are terrible now. I've always felt like Obsidian's have not been very good. People love Fallout New Vegas. I didn't think it was very good. I especially think the writing was just not very good. That's my opinion. It's been, at this point, 10 years since I played it, but I just... I see part of video game bad writing is that there's a tendency to reach beyond your grasp. Stan Lee was never a great writer as far as, you know, when we're comparing him to the high art, right? He's not a Dostoevsky or something. But he knew his market, he knew what he was doing, and he never tried to reach beyond his grasp. He tried to tell pulp stories directly, as fun, as engaging, as quickly as possible. That's why Stan Lee is the best comic book writer. He never tried to reach beyond his grasp. He understood that medium so well. He never tried to make the medium more than it was. Frank Miller can maybe make it more than it is. I'm not going to, you know, someone's about, what about Watchmen? I'm like, I don't think it's very good. Sorry. Anyway, some writers can make it more than it is. Rare is someone like Neil Gaiman who can actually write comics and they're good, and then write novels and they're also good. And like he can execute in more than one medium. That's pretty rare. It's pretty rare to do that. But yeah, someone mentioned that, like, the video game industry wants to hire writers, and they've been told they got to hire writers, and chances are everybody who already, the coders and like the game directors are probably better writers than the people they're hiring. You know, if they just like watched some of my videos on how to write, they'd be like, oh, let's just do this in the game, and they would do it and it would be great. Whereas the person they hire would be more concerned about, is this sexist or ableist, and has no idea about story structure or anything like that, or like how to write characters or any of that kind of stuff. Patterson is an industry. Does Patterson write his own books? Maybe not. You know, most of the good stuff is pretty well hidden. Yeah, I think most of Eric July's viewers care about comics, since most of his videos have been about comics for years. Okay, maybe that's true. I'm just thinking of like your average YouTuber doesn't, like your YouTube audience doesn't care that much about comics. You know, I don't think my audience cares a whole lot about comics. Pitchforks here, get your pitchforks. The current writers make Obsidian's older work appear almost masterful in comparison. Yeah, it's okay. Hey, it's okay. Like if you like Fallout New Vegas, and that's like, I don't think the Fallout. So, just really quickly, like it's okay to really enjoy Fallout and the Fallout universe. I have never found the Fallout setting particularly interesting, other than the first game. Fallout 1 was really good and really fun when it came out, and I was really engaged by the setting. Fallout 2, I don't remember that much about it. I played it. Fallout 1 was where it was at. Fallout 3, I had a lot of fun with, but I had no reason to return to it. Wandering around a brown wasteland of garbage strewn everywhere is not interesting to me. And meeting ghouls is not interesting to me. The lore behind ghouls and super mutants and power armor, I don't care about. None of that is interesting to me at all. By comparison, we take that same format and we have alien ruins and politics, and we have gods and Daedra and dragons. That's way more interesting. There's so much more depth to the Elder Scrolls than to Fallout. It's like comparing shit to gold. Right? It's just no comparison in terms of the interest, the depth, the kind of stories that you can tell, the variety of stories. It's not that there's no variety of stories in Fallout, but you're just kind of treading over the same couple of ideas and themes over and over and over and over and over again without any kind of difference to any of it. Here's the cannibal faction. Here's another cannibal faction. Here's some super mutants. Here's some other super mutants, but these ones are wacky. because it's Fallout New Vegas. I'm like, I don't care about that. Hey, now I will say this was funny. It's like I played Fallout New Vegas. I'm like, oh, there's Prim. I lived in Las Vegas, right? I lived in Las Vegas. So it was kind of funny to show up at Prim and like have the casinos from Prim be all destroyed and to kill bandits in it. And then I moved on and I was like, it's just, there's nothing interesting around Las Vegas in real life. So there's nothing interesting around Las Vegas in the game really either. They add interesting things. I think I've ran into some aliens. You know, I wanted to side with Caesar's Legion, but I felt like it would have broken the main story because I just wanted it to be interesting. It just wasn't interesting. So if you find it interesting, that's great. But like, it's really boring to me. I have never replayed a Fallout game other than Fallout 1. Fallout 1's the only one I've ever replayed. And I would even play it again because I think it was good. But yeah, the rest of them, I barely made it out of the tutorial for Fallout 4. I got so bored and cringed by it. So I've never really gotten into Fallout 4, but as soon as I got out, I'm like, this is just more boring, garbage wasteland. It looks like crap. There's nothing interesting or visually appealing about it. I don't enjoy the fantasy of walking around a post-nuclear wasteland. It's just not interesting to me at all. So if you like Fallout, that's great. I don't hate Fallout. I like Fallout. I've played the games, but I'm not into it enough to care about it. You know what I mean? Same thing with like, you want to watch the Fallout show? I'm like, not really. Like I don't find Fallout a unique or interesting enough setting for me to care about watching a series in it. Like I might because you guys want me to, but like, are you going to get the answers you want from me? Which is me going to be like, this is kind of boring and stupid like the games, but without the fun of killing zombies. What makes Fallout fun is shooting zombies and blowing up super mutants and that kind of stuff. That's what makes the game fun. All the lore is, I don't care about it. Don't care about it. Have you read the book Lessons in Chemistry? I have not. I've read books on chemistry. Fallout, isn't America bad? One thing I really liked about Fallout 3 was the karma system. I would love to see that in more like fantasy games. It's basically the light side, dark side from KOTOR, but I just like that mechanic. I just think it's fun. Oh, in 2020, Condé Nast withdrew the licenses for Sanctum Books to reprint the original Doc Savage and Shadow books and hired James Patterson to put out garbage versions with a co-writer, likely a ghostwriter. Thank you. I remember this. Now you're reminding it of me. Now I remember it. I remember the cover. People were like, this cover's awful. I'm like, this is just a standard modern Photoshop cover. Yeah, it's not good. But it looks like every other cover in the genre, so people will know that it's a new book. I liked KOTOR too. I've been wanting to replay it for a while because I've met so many other people that are like, no, it's really good. But when it came out, we really hated it. I'm just saying. I didn't hate it, but it was like KOTOR 1 was so good. Anyway, I didn't watch the Fallout show. It's like the last of a show where the lack of interactivity makes it just another run-of-the-mill zombie apocalypse movie. Yeah. Yeah, what makes Last of Us fun is that you can shoot zombies. You can shoot the fungus zombies. People focus on the story because a decent story is rare in a game. Most games are not focused on the story, and that's okay. Games should be focused on fun gameplay, not a story. It's like, what's the story of Morrowind? Oh, there is a story to Morrowind, but most people get sidetracked, like doing all the other stuff. And that's part of the fun of it, to me. Max Allan Collins is a great writer, both prose and graphic novels. Yeah, that's like the rare talent. I need to be on the Restream chat because I'm afraid I might miss something on another platform. There's never anyone that watches like on any of the other platforms, though, unfortunately. They need to stop making games into movies and movies into games. They're mediums with different strengths. Yeah, that's what they. It's like this is a cinematic game. Why would I want to watch? Why would I want to play that? I want to play a game. I will say the Spider-Man games were pretty good for being cinematic games, right? They were fun to play. You're Spider-Man fighting bad guys. That's fun. You know. Somebody was complaining about Final Fantasy 16. Final Fantasy 16 is just gameplay and then cutscenes. I'm like, that's exactly what I want. That's actually why I really liked Final Fantasy 13, is that it was just like fight bad guys and then there's a cutscene. Fight bad guys and then we get a cutscene. I like that. Other people hate it, but it's like Final Fantasy 16 freaking nails it. The parts that are less fun is like, let me wander around this little part of the map doing some MMO quests. No. I want to fight bad guys and then have some cool cutscenes and have a kaiju fight. Final Fantasy 16 is awesome. It's got everything. It's got like romance. It's got, kaijus. It's got magic. It's got sword fighting. It's got cool costumes and big swords. It's great. It's actually a great game. One of the best games I played. Probably the best game I played last year was Final Fantasy 16. It's really good. I think the best game I played this year is the Final Fantasy 7 Remake Part 2. Even though now that I've done it, and I may do like a little video on it. Why not? I should do more videos of like game analysis because there's such a big audience for it. But I get bound up. I've been so busy, and it's like when I make a choice, like, do I make a video, spend that effort making a video that people may not watch, or do I focus on what I really want to do, which is write books? I just go for what I love, which is writing books. But yeah, Final Fantasy 16 or Final Fantasy 7 remake, remake part 2. The worst part of the original Final Fantasy 7 to me was that stretch after you leave Midgar, really until like disc 3. I think it really drags. It just wanders around aimlessly. We don't have a strong idea of what the conflict is at that point. The conflict becomes very nebulous, and it's that case in this game. It's just the gameplay's better than the original, and the graphics are better, and you just have more stuff, so it actually improves the experience a lot. So if we're comparing the second half of disc 1 and like disc 2, I guess, to the Final Fantasy 7 Rebirth, the Rebirth is superior, and I actually think the remake is superior to the original as well, because it's only Midgar. People are going to again, this is like an unpopular gaming opinion, but I like Final Fantasy 7. I played it entirely on stream on the channel, and I had a good time with it. But it's not my favorite Final Fantasy game, and I think there's some real weak points. I think the game really just slows down and becomes kind of boring after you leave Midgar. Midgar is the most aesthetically and thematically interesting part of Final Fantasy VII. So once you depart Midgar, it takes a long time before you get things that replace it that are even remotely. Nothing is as interesting as Midgar. That's just the fact. But in this Rebirth, they were able to like fill in a lot of, aesthetically at least, a lot of the stuff, fill in a lot of the lore. So the world feels a lot more alive and a lot less empty. When you play the original, the world just feels empty. You like walk around. It's like I'm walking around in some empty areas by Midgar to another, fighting some random monsters to get to another tiny village. Like, why is the world like this? It seems completely upside down from what you get out of Midgar. Like, those things just don't go together at all. Anyway, yeah. So I got that game for free when there was a giveaway of the year. I haven't played it though. I'm not sure what game we're talking about. Oh, the Guardians of the Galaxy game. I'll play it. If you like it, then I'll play it. I haven't gotten it though. Maybe I can get it on a deal. I like the Guardians of the Galaxy movies. I think that also sometimes I have a lot of like opinions that I think put me at odds sometimes with my audience. It's like, I can't believe you like James Gunn's movies. I'm like, they're funny, they're good, they're space operas, they're more Star Wars than modern Star Wars. They don't take themselves seriously, which I don't think comic book movies should. They're just like a good example of what I think a space opera movie should be, and kind of reminds me of like Luc Besson, and in a really good way. Not for everyone though, right? Some people are gonna dislike it. It's okay. Lightning Returns has a terrible story, but the side quest stories were amazing. Yeah, it's like an apocalypse story. I have to go back and play those again, but yeah. My husband played it over Christmas, and I was lost in the world. It's a very good balance of fighting and story. No unnecessary side quests either. Yeah, I like that. I'm a sucker for job class mechanics. I am too. I love jobs and classes that you can mix and match. It's why I loved Final Fantasy V. It's why I loved Final Fantasy III so much. Their job system was just so much fun to play around with. The meta level was just so fun. Same thing with Final Fantasy Tactics, Tactics Advance 2. All the Final Fantasy Tactics games have just been like the gameplay. The job class system added to the tactical gameplay. I just love it. It's my favorite thing. Out of the video game adaptations I've seen, the best one is the 2010 Prince of Persia movie. Yeah, it's similar to the first POTC, albeit not as good. Maybe 65% as good. Yeah. I love Final Fantasy V for the jobs. I love the job system. There's just something, it feels so good. It felt so good to get to that final boss, and I have like 3 mimics and like a freelancer or something. I have it on stream. I bring it up and like be like, okay, I'm gonna kill this final boss. I'm gonna kill this tree boss in one turn, where the mimics are double casting, double cast, double cast. So you're casting like, I don't remember what I was casting, like meteor 8 times, and it just like kills the boss. It's like, yes, it feels so good. It was something like that. Like they were just mimicking the highest level spell all the way across the board, and then double attacking. And then I think I had one like melee guy who he had double attack, and then he was dual wielding, so he would attack 4 times every turn. And I think like half my party died because I didn't even bother healing because there was so much damage going on. I was like, we don't even need to heal. But he did like one turn where he killed like 1 or 2 of my guys, and then I still managed to kill him. I think I did something similar with Final Fantasy VI where I set everybody up with like double attacks and they just wrecked Kefka or whoever. It was a lot of fun. All right, let me get back on track. Publishing topics. What is the standard? Let's talk about the standard publishing model for independently published fiction books. Here's the standard model. You write a book and you publish it and you market it. Let's break down each of those things. So you write the book on your own. Maybe you hire an editor to help you, because a traditional publisher might hire an editor to help you. So you hire an editor to edit it. You edit the book with the help of that editor. You make some of their suggestions, some of their changes. You format the book yourself. I have a video on how to format an ebook for publication using Microsoft Word. It's very easy. You upload it to wherever you would like people to be able to buy that ebook. Hopefully Amazon is on that list, because almost all your sales are going to come through Amazon. So you put it on Amazon, maybe you put it on other stuff too. But chances are you're probably going to just put it on Amazon because you get higher royalties that way. And since 99% of your sales are going to come through Amazon anyway, there's really no reason to go wide for most indie authors. So you put it on Amazon. When you put it on Amazon, you need a cover. So that means you need to hire a cover artist. So you have to do the research. Go find a cover artist or learn to design a cover yourself. If you're a graphic designer or you're good at learning, you can take some of the tips I have or other people have put on YouTube and just like come up with a great cover. Make it roughly book shaped. You could have Amazon generate a cover for you. I don't recommend it. It's better to design a cover. You have to decide on some categories. What category is your book in? That's your genre. So you assign the closest categories, and then you put in a bunch of keywords that will help the algorithm refine it. So let's say you're writing a fantasy novel, and it's young adult. Young adult doesn't have any specific meaning. It just means that like younger readers might like it. It doesn't really mean anything. So, but maybe you mean it for younger readers. There's no like explicit stuff in it. Of course, now they put like explicit sex in young adult, which is just weird. But you put it on there. You put young adult as one of the tags. You put magic as one of the keywords. You put elves because there's some elves in it. You put high fantasy. You can put young adult fantasy. So you pick 7 keywords that roughly dial in the book. You price the book according to a couple of things. So the standard model for indie fiction publishing, if you're following like the 20 books to 50K sort of model, is to publish a series. Everything has to be a series. Why a series? Well, your goal is to make money. So you're going to make money by maximizing every reader's buy-in. So every person who buys, you want to maximize the possibility of the return on that one reader. So you're going to probably price book 1 fairly low, 99 cents, maybe even free if you're new. So new authors often do book 1 free. I've done it. So 99 cents to free, or $2.99. low enough that people are not going to think twice before buying the book. They're going to be like, 99 cents, I'll buy it. Book 2 is $2.99. Book 3, $4.99. Everything else after that's after book 3 is $4.99 and up. You make every book fairly short, 50,000 words or less. You want to usually make book 1 a little bit longer. You want that to be your most fleshed out, your best book. You spend all your money on book 1 because the goal is to make a fan with book 1 that's going to buy book 2, book 3, book 4, book 5, book 6. You write as many books as you possibly can in that series. Ideally, that series will be in a microgenre where there are not a lot of books. So let's say it's fantasy. It's going to be vampire fantasy. It's going to be mermaid fantasy. It's going to be druid fantasy, right? So it's about druids or something, right? Like there's an Iron Druid series that's been successful. So you do that. You write 20 books. They're all between 30 and 60,000 words. So shorter in novels because you want to maximize the sell-through. Every single book ends on a cliffhanger with a setup for the conflict for the next book, right? So if you resolve the conflict from the book, you set up the conflict for the next book, just like with a soap opera. And so what you're basically doing is rather than writing 20 books, you're writing 20 soap opera episodes in book form. Not that hard when you put it that way, right? How hard is it to write a soap opera episode? Well, it's an hour of dialogue. So you do it that way. That's the standard kind of Amazon-centered publishing model. Then you figure out how to run ads, maybe by taking an AdWords course on how to run ads, and you advertise the crap out of book 1. Book 1 does not need to return all its money. Book 1 merely needs to get people reading. All you really need to keep track of is the total revenue versus the total spend. And you're going to spend all of your money on book 1. Okay, book 1 is where the ads need to be. Book 1 is where you want everyone to start. You do not want to write a series where people can jump in at random books. Now, I do the complete opposite of this, but I'm telling you what the standard model is. I don't do the standard model because I don't want to write a 20-book long soap opera. But that's what indie writers do to be successful. You notice that it's a series. Everything's a series. No one-off books. Why would you not want to write one-off books? Well, for someone to buy a one-off book from you, they have to either really like the book or really like you. And chances are they don't know either one. It's not going to be such a special book in their microgenre that they're willing to read a one-off book for it. It's going to be original and interesting. That's why it's a one-off. So they're not going to buy it. But if you do manage to get a reader, like, you know, I never wrote a sequel to Muramasa. People are always asking for a sequel for this. It's like, I have a story in mind that could come after this, but I'm not going to write it unless I feel like it's really good, because this book stands perfectly well on its own. It's complete all by itself. It needs no additions for it to exist and be great. There it is. Okay. I don't do this. But for everyone that's a huge fan, like, no one writes these books, you should write more sequels. Yes, I should if I want to make money. Right? That would be wise. But I don't want to write something unless I'm really excited to write it, unless I think it's going to be good and I'm really excited to put it out. So yeah, if you get a fan on that book 1, you really want to maximize the amount of money you can extract from that fan by writing as many books as possible in that series, 20. Right? Eventually there's like a cap out where people are not going to keep buying it because they're bored of the soap opera. They get bored. But if you do it right, yeah, you can write 20, 50,000 word books. Those 20, 50,000 word books add up to one George R.R. Martin book. Right? He wrote a book that was 400 and something thousand words, right? It's like writing one Lord of the Rings, one The Stand by Stephen King, if you're writing them fairly long. But a lot of people make them even shorter. So you're talking less than one George R.R. Martin book of writing to make that 20-book long series. Imagine if you took Game of Thrones, like the first Game of Thrones, and it's a TV series now, so you can just imagine this as a model. You take Game of Thrones, you write it, you split it up into 24 books, and you sell 24 novellas. 99 cents, $2.99, $4.99, out. People will keep buying those novellas to get that next part of that crazy story up to where Ned Stark is killed. George R.R. Martin's basically writing a soap opera, but he's selling it as one big book because he wrote Game of Thrones in the very early 90s. So this model didn't exist then. But if George R. R. Martin were like an indie author, what would he be doing? Well, it'd be on like Game of Thrones book 80 at this point, and people would still be buying it because he's good. He's just that good at managing that style of writing. Once you know the secret, it's not nearly as impressive. What he does is he'll write a chapter, this chapter is Neddard Stark. Cliffhanger. Oh, let's go to Cersei Lannister. Let's go to Tyrion Lannister. We'll go to Jon Snow. Here's Jon Snow's chapter. Cliffhanger. We're going to go to whoever, right? You go to a different character. So it just hops around all these different characters. There's Daenerys's thing, right? That way you have to keep turning the pages because you didn't get a resolution on what he introduced with the point of view Ned chapter. And so you have to keep reading to get back there to figure out, well, Ned got captured. What's going to happen? He's really good at it. Once you know the trick, it actually can be annoying. You're like, come on, dude. You can just write this story straight ahead and give me the resolution and not spend 400,000 words on it. Right? Right, buddy? But he's good at knowing how to like keep the reader on the hook. And I think that's why it translated so well to a TV series. But personally, I don't like the TV series. It's too boring for me. Most TV is. 100% of my sales are on Amazon. No longer bother with the other platforms. There you go. The only reason I would go wide is you can make your book free if you go wide. And here's how you do it. So you put your book on Amazon. The lowest price you can sell it for is 99 cents. So you sell it for 99 cents. Then you go over to Draft to Digital and you make it free on Draft to Digital and publish to whatever else. Barnes & Noble and Apple Books. It doesn't matter. So you go wide. Go wide on book one. Only on book one. And then you email Amazon support and you'll be like, oh, can you price match this book? Price match my book. It is free on Barnes & Noble. Here's the link. And then they'll make your book free on Amazon. That's how you make your book free on Amazon. So you make book one free. That's how you do it. And then the rest of the books you only sell on Amazon. And chances are, and I've done this, like even if it's free on Barnes & Noble, it'll be like 1,000 downloads on Amazon. How many downloads did I get on Barnes & Noble? 2. For a free book. 2 or 1. And 2 on Apple Books. And 1,000 on Amazon. And that could be 1 month or a year, right? But the point is like, even if it's free, people don't go off the Amazon platform. Isn't that crazy? They won't go off the Amazon platform even if the book is free. They won't grab it. So anyway, that's the standard indie book model. You write book one, write 20 books in a microgenre, always leave on a cliffhanger. Book one is 99 cents or free, $2.99, $5.99 on out. And the math will add up to where if you are able to advertise that book one and people will buy through, how much money are they going to give you for 20 books? Well, it's going to be like 17 times 5. You're going to end up making $100 per customer. So $100 per customer, if you have 500 customers a year, that's like $50,000. It's not, I just have to get, how many people do I need to get to download book one? Or 99 cents. I think if you have a small price barrier, it helps, because then it's kind of distorted. Like, 5,000 people downloaded book one, but nobody bought book two. What's going on there? I guess book one sucks. Is that what it is? Right? Make it 99 cents, and then like people can, I'll buy book two. So you can check your buy through, and then it's a lot easier. It's like, I really only have to sell 500 copies. So imagine, you're taking a Game of Thrones book. Game of Thrones you can buy for $8.99. Or 1 Audible credit for the audiobook. George R. R. Martin's making a lot less per word than a really good indie fiction writer is. Because that good indie fiction writer doesn't have to sell 1 million copies. He just has to sell 500. of every book. So you take Game of Thrones, you divide it by 20, you turn it into a 20-book series, price every single one at $2.99 or whatever, and you got to be able to sell 500 people on that to make $50,000. That's why they target the micro niche. Well, is there 500 people willing to buy this book? And I can show you a tool that can kind of help you do that, to determine how many customers maybe there are in like a certain micro niche. And then if you can, so how many, so there's 10,000 customers there. Maybe I can get 100 of them to buy through my book and I'll make $10,000 or something, right? Why don't I do that? So why don't I do that model? Well, I hate it. I hate it. That's why. And I look at this and it's like, let's say we're going to use the 50K, 20 books to 50K. $50,000. Now, $50,000 was a lot of money to me when I was 21. $50,000 was also worth a lot more when I was 21, because that was nigh on 20 years ago, my friends. So just as an aside, you want to know how expensive things have gotten, because I will compare how expensive things are now to how cheap they used to be back in ye olden times. So my first apartment was, I believe, $550 a month. And it was a 2-bedroom apartment and I had a roommate. I had the bigger room, so I think I paid $300 and he paid $250. Now that included water, sewer, trash. Didn't have to pay any extra for that. Did not include power. Our power bill was about, during the summer when it was 120 degrees outside or whatever in Fresno, California, our power bill was about $40. My health insurance was $60 a month. $60 a month for my health insurance. Well, probably didn't cover anything. Wrong. Covered virtually everything. You know, what was your max out of pocket? We didn't have that back then. It was just health insurance, right? You paid for doctor visits out of pocket, which were $80, maybe, if you need to go to the doctor. And then if you had like an emergency room bill, it basically paid for everything. My deductible was $1,600. Because I figured that out. It was like, you know, I could come up with $1,500, like if I have to, even when I was dead broke, knew I could come up with $1,500, right, to pay for something, right? But I wouldn't want to be on the hook for a $30,000 hospital bill if I like broke my leg or something like that. So yeah, $60 health insurance. My insurance for my car was a 1993 Ford Explorer, $45 a month. $45 a month. Grocery bill. I don't remember what my grocery bill was back then, because I almost never bought groceries. I ate out all the time. I was out gigging every night, so not every night, but like 4 nights a week. So I just ate out a lot and bought groceries, maybe $30 a week on groceries. Not that much. I do remember the last time I was heavily budgeting groceries, I spent $100 a month. Actually, it was $150 a month at Costco, and that bought all our groceries. We spent, me and my roommate spent about $200 to $300 at Costco every month, and we bought all of our protein, all of our food, minus like lettuce, which we had to buy at the store, but like spinach, all that kind of stuff, milk, whatever we wanted to buy, eggs, cartons of eggs, like 6 dozen eggs was like $15, right? We bought all of that between us and split it. You know, put it in the fridge and split it. I think we went every other week. So it was about $300 a month in food. Split 2 ways. So $150 a month in food. And my rent was $450 a month. $450 a month. And my health insurance was $66. And that was like 2010. Okay, so now people are like, oh, well, my rent is $2,500 a month, not $300. My health insurance is $2,100 a month, not $60. My car insurance is $300 a month, not $45. You know, it's so much harder to get things done now than it was. That's just my aside. So when some, I hate to say like baby boomers, but they do this, like, oh, you just gotta save and work hard. It's like everything's 4 times as expensive because of all the crap that's going on. It's a little harder than that. I also have $500 a month in student loan debt that I don't, but a lot of people do. It's like they have $500 a month in student loan debt that you have to pay because somebody told you to get a degree. That's how it is, man. I had zero debt, zero expenses. I lived on $1,000 a month, no problem. I could live on $12,000 a year and live great as a single man. Now it's like $12,000 a year. We need like 10 times that, and we don't have a mortgage payment. It's crazy now. I have not seen Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3. I have not seen that one. It's one of the only good post-in-game movies. Some elements are great. I like how thoroughly evil the villain is. I'll check it out. What books outside of your own do you recommend to expand my literary knowledge? Okay. What a great question. What books ought you to read? Read the books that you want. That's the simplest answer. Read the books which excite you. Reading a book because you ought to read it is often a miserable experience. I can tell you lots of books that you ought to read. They're not necessarily books that you're going to enjoy reading, which means that you may not finish them. How many books in school would you rather have just read the Cliff Notes on? And maybe Cliff Notes isn't a thing anymore. It was when I was in high school. Kids would just buy the Cliff Notes and skip reading the book because the Cliff Notes would basically give you what the teacher wanted in an essay, and you wouldn't have to read the boring book that you didn't like. So read the books that you love. Read the books that you're really interested in. If you're looking to expand your literary horizons, read. It depends what genre you're interested in reading. I'm going to assume a lot of people like fantasy and science fiction. So you should be reading Edgar Rice Burroughs. Princess of Mars is a book everyone who likes pulp fiction should read. I'm a big fan of Robert E. Howard. I'm a big fan of H.P. Lovecraft. Those are the big three that I would recommend you read from the first half of the 20th century that you probably didn't read in any of your literature classes. H.P. Lovecraft, Robert E. Howard, and Edgar Rice Burroughs. Those are like the three pulpish writers from the first half of the 20th century. I recommend everybody just read some stuff from. Beyond that, I'm a big fan of a lot of things. I love Michael Moorcock. I love Jack Vance. I love Glenn Cook. He's still around, still writing. So is Michael Moorcock, actually, even though he's like 90 or something. He's still around, still working. It's great. And if you haven't read Lord of the Rings, you should read Lord of the Rings. That's if you're in the fantasy area. If you're in the science fiction area, it's a little harder because stuff is so more like all over the place. If you've never read Dostoevsky, give it a shot. Find a good translation and give it a shot. You don't have to read it in the original Russian. If you haven't read the classics, give those a shot. Find a good translation of Beowulf. Find a good translation of the Odyssey and the Iliad. Find good translations of the Aeneid. Consolation of Philosophy by Boethius. Even though that's not a piece of literature, it's an important work for the late antiquity, and a really important classic to read. Read Dante. Read the Divine Comedy. Not just the Inferno. Read Purgatorio, Paradiso. Read them all. Read Canterbury Tales. Read Shakespeare. Give a shot at all of these things. Read Ivanhoe by Sir Walter Scott. Read Robinson Crusoe. Check out Sherlock Holmes by Arthur Conan Doyle. Read Dracula. Everyone should read Dracula. These are classics of genre fiction and just fiction in general that I think everybody should read. What else? Read Frankenstein by Mary Shelley. Yeah. There's so much stuff out there that you might get a benefit from. It's hard to know where to begin, but the most important thing is that you are interested and really want to read the book. Sometimes there's a stylistic barrier. So if you're going to read Ivanhoe, you're going to encounter a stylistic barrier if what you're used to is modern genre fiction. You just are. I also love Shogun, right? Read my samurai book, but you can also read Shogun. But I think Ivanhoe is worth attempting, even if it's really hard to get into for a modern reader. Same thing with Robinson Crusoe, or find a good translation of Don Quixote. These are all things. So I'm listing books that I never read in a literature class, but yet I think are great books and are more influential on our, I don't know what to call it, like our grand cultural tradition of literature than, that's not true. We've read Shakespeare and Canterbury Tales, but like never read Dracula, even though Dracula is one of the most influential books ever written. Never read it in a literature class. I didn't know who a lot of authors even were. I didn't know who Walter Scott was. You know, I knew who Arthur Conan Doyle was, not because my literature teachers ever talked about him, but because they talked about him on TV. I didn't know who Edgar Rice Burroughs was until I grew up. Never heard a teacher mention him all the way through graduate school. Never heard his name mentioned, and never heard one of his books mentioned. Meanwhile, he might be the most important author that has been alive post Shakespeare. You want to talk about a guy who not just influenced a genre, he really created a genre, like what science fiction was. Tarzan and Princess of Mars, Tarzan, King of Mars. Crown me Tarzan, King of Mars. It was just, I thought literature was all, like the only literature that I remember studying, like after my freshman year in high school, is 20th century, first half of 20th century American literature. That's what everybody wanted to teach. It's Ernest Hemingway, it's John Steinbeck, you know. I mean, you read To Kill a Mockingbird. Lee Harper only wrote that one book, though. Well, she came out with another one. She was really elderly, like a sequel or maybe a prequel that people really didn't like. But anyway, you read that one, you know. It was funny, though. I was talking to my wife about this. They made us read the worst versions, like the worst books from every author. We got to read Of Mice and Men by John Steinbeck. Might be his worst book. It's certainly like nothing. It's just misery porn. And it has no resolution and just teaches you that life is always bad. It's a perfect encapsulation of like modern misery. Why do teachers want you to read it? Because it's shorter than Grapes of Wrath, which is 10 times better. Read Grapes of Wrath instead. We're going to read Steinbeck, Of Mice and Men. We're going to read Ernest Hemingway. We're going to read Old Man and the Sea, because it's only 33,000 words. It's his worst book. Why can't you read For Whom the Bell Tolls? Why don't you read his best book? It's longer, but it's better. Kids are going to read a better book that's longer. So we didn't even read the good books by the important 20th century authors. We read like the bad books. Why was you look at the sales numbers, it's like that's just schools buying copies of Mice and Men. No one likes that story, man. It's just depressing and boring. And just has a terrible resolution. The resolution is I have to kill my retarded friend because he kills people without meaning to. Yeah. There's no good solution, so we're gonna put him down like a dog. He's a dangerous retard, so we're gonna kill him like a dog. That's their conclusion. Now I'm using that word. Some people are offensive. You're gonna find that word offensive. That's fine. I'm using it for a reason, because I found the conclusion and the entire story offensive. I could say his intellectually disabled friend, they put him down like an animal. I should have killed my own dog. So that's what he does. He kills his own dog at the end. Horrible. Horrible. Let's read Grapes of Wrath instead, guys, okay? That's a better book. Right. What do you think of William Faulkner? I'm trying to remember what I read by Faulkner. Because I read him in graduate school. I remember thinking the prose was good. Let me see what books he wrote, because I'm spacing. I will say I haven't read him for my own pleasure, which probably means I don't like him that much. Let's see, what he wrote. Oh, Sound and the Fury. Okay. I've read Sound and the Fury, but that one might not have been for school. Maybe it was As I Lay Dying? I don't remember. It's okay. I probably didn't like him enough to really remember everything about him. Another one of those 20th century writers that we had to read during the time. Same with James Joyce. Like, reading Ulysses is a chore. It's only interesting if you're like aware of the meta of it. Like, here's the Odyssey, but we're going to tell it with a bunch of weird styles. It's very 20th century. It's very modern in that approach. Not really fun to read, though. I'm not a fan. Thoughts on Ayn Rand fiction books? Ayn Rand has Diarrhea of the Word Processor. I'm a fan. So, I'll tell you, I think I like The Fountainhead more than... No, I think I like Atlas Shrugged more. Atlas Shrugged has a better story. The Fountainhead kind of more encapsulates her romantic approach to art, but sort of... I think there's a better story in Atlas Shrugged. Atlas Shrugged, though, it's like about the themes and the speeches, and not really the story. So it's hard to know what to say. Like, the ideas are very influential. The speeches are very good. I don't take a lot of stock from those ideas as a 40-year-old man in modern America. But I don't think it's bad. If you're going to pick one to read, probably Atlas Shrugged. That is like the big one. That's the famous one. She thought it would like start a revolution. It did not, and she fell into a deep depression over that. Her personal life was completely effed, and she was a bad person, in my opinion, and the way she treated her husband, and intentionally engaged in affairs with like Nathaniel Branden, who also created the whole idea of self-esteem, which I'm also not a fan of as an adult. But anyway, yeah, Atlas Shrugged has more of a story. It's very thick, it's very long, but it's poignant. There's a lot of good moments in it that make it worth reading, I think. The Scarlet Pimpernel, King Solomon's Mines. King Solomon's Mines is... You want to know where Indiana Jones came from? It came from King Solomon's Mines. Princess of Zenda, Ray Bradbury, especially short stories and Dandelion Wine. I like Ray Bradbury as well. H.G. Wells, yeah. Jules Verne. Yeah, Jules Verne, there's translations. There's also abridgments as well, which, I mean, what are you going to do with those? So Mark Twain, I'm not a huge fan of Mark Twain, but he also is very influential, believe it or not, in portal fantasy in ways that are not obvious. So if you read Connecticut Yankee and King Arthur's Court, that's one of the first modern uses of what we call portal fantasy, prior to Princess of Mars by Edgar Rice Burroughs. And it's a pretty good story. That's why there's a million different versions of it. A kid in King Arthur's Court. The idea of a modern person being transported to a pre-modern world where he has an advantage due to his modern and iron mind. That's a very appealing idea, and it's resonated not just across the years, but across cultures. You have a whole very popular genre in Japan called isekai, which is basically Connecticut Yankee and King Arthur's Court, but instead of King Arthur's Court as a semi-historical place, it's just a straight-up fantasy land. Yeah, Isaac Asimov, I go back and forth because, yeah, I like some Asimov, but it's never like my favorite. I'm a bigger fan of Philip K. Dick. I like Philip K. Dick stories a lot. That's just me. Vox Day is right about boomers. I think Owen Benjamin's doing a whole boomer week. And keep in mind, it's like I had it really easy 20 years ago, and it was like hard compared to the late 70s or to the early 70s when you could pay for your apartment on my dad collected cans to pay his tuition. You couldn't do that in 2000, but you could work a little bit and make enough money to be okay, even on minimum wage. You can't do that now. Like minimum wage, it's like I don't know how anyone can survive even on minimum wage. It's insane, the costs of things like health insurance and rent. Just health insurance and rent will bankrupt people now. You know. So anyway. Oh, Brother, Where Art Thou? Yeah, I remember that. That's the Odyssey. Okay, so Ulysses. If you're going to attempt Ulysses, know it from the outside. Know the meta about it. It's an Odyssey told with a variety of styles and approaches that are intended to be. It's about the style of the writing and not the story, because the story is familiar. And if you approach it from that, you may like it. But if you don't like it, that's okay. You're with the majority of people who prefer the language to be a understandable medium through which you're going to access the story, the setting, characters, and plot, not something that is a barrier to you understanding them, which is really what ends up happening, I think, with James Joyce, is that the style becomes a barrier. And I feel that way about some other postmodern writers who are intentionally writing in like Scots, or like avoiding punctuation, or writing things without paragraphs. You see lots of weird things like that. Writing things in second person intentionally, writing things from the perspective of like fingernails or rocks, right? Like that kind of stuff is intentionally weird, and it's about the style, but it inhibits you from accessing the story. So for most people that are interested in writing genre fiction, you don't want to do that. Instead, you want to use traditional E.B. White manual style, Chicago manual style. Write good prose and dialogue with normal formatting so that people can access what they care about, which is setting, characters, and plot. That's my advice for most people. Okay. Before I forget, this is going on long here. I do want to put that book up on Amazon because it's May 1st. So before I forget, what is an alternative to the standard indie publishing model? This is the hard one. So going all the way back to like making $50,000 on a book. So there are lots of things that I can do to make $50,000, and there are lots of things that most people can do to make $50,000 that are less work than writing, marketing, and investing in a giant book series, right? And to keep in mind, to generate $50,000 in revenue, you may have to spend a lot of money in advertising. You may have to spend $25,000 marketing, right? That's a lot. You know, there's guys whose ad spend is like $1,000 a month. They're just burning money to try to get people to buy book one with that standard model. So you have to have some cash reserves. It's a win more strategy. I've talked about that before. But you could start a gardening business and build up to $50,000 a year a lot quicker than you could a fiction business. So if I'm going to be writing fiction, my goal is not like $50,000. My goal is to put out good stuff that I care about, things that I want to exist. And if I can make money doing that, great. And if I don't, then I can look at myself in the mirror every day and I can enjoy what I did, because to me, writing in a micro niche, that a story which I don't care about, at the format I hate, for an audience that I don't care about, is not a pleasurable experience. That to me is actually torture. So that's why I don't do that. It's like I would rather write half as much and have a day job to make up the difference than to do the 20 books to 50K method. I hate it. I hate the results of it. I hate the books that come out with that approach. I just find them awful. And that's, to me, one of the problems with indie fiction is like, oh, Stu, why don't you promote more indie fiction? I'm like, I promote my friends all the time. I'll promote my friends. I promote the stuff I like. But when I go onto Amazon and I start looking for fantasy books, every single one is like a long series full of stuff I don't care about. So I end up reading stuff from before 1980 because it's a safer bet. I hate to admit that. Like, I would love to promote more indie stuff, but as long as it's in that format of like micro niche, all about the tropes, it's boring to me, and I just won't be able to get through it very well. You know, so. The biggest revolution Ayn Rand started was with the mainstreaming of cinematic video games with BioShock. I liked BioShock. Poul Anderson is probably easier for a beginner to get into than Philip K. Dick. I love Poul Anderson. Read The High Crusade. That is a fun book. But if you want something heavier, read Mother of Kings. Also very good. Even Isaac Asimov, other than maybe I, Robot and the Elijah Bailey stories. It's better to try and fail than never try at all. Any thoughts on hard-boiled detective fiction? I don't read it a lot. I'm not super interested in it. It's okay. It's a good format if that's what you like. It seems like there's a lot of people who enjoy reading mysteries, so it seems to be a pretty hot genre. You could probably find some readers if you're good at it. You have to have a really good sense of how to write a mystery and how to control information to write a good mystery plot, in my opinion. So I don't really read them a lot, so it's whatever. I think it's because I generally don't find the setting part interesting. So you have to sell me really hard on all the other stuff. In a lot of cases, they just aren't doing that. And that's okay. This is not a genre that I'm super into, personally. Kind of like post-apocalyptic. I'm like, I don't really care about it that much. Canticle for Leibowitz is interesting, but it's also pretty slow book. It's one of those classics that people should read if they like Fallout. If you like Fallout, read Canticle for Leibowitz. I'm trying to remember who wrote it. Forgot the author. It's good, but it's also pretty slow. So if you want to find the inspiration for games like Fallout, you should read Canticle for Leibowitz. It's a good one. Yeah. So anyway, what are some alternatives to doing the 20 books thing? So one of them is to just do whatever you want and see what happens. That's me. I try to get audiences that are interested in me as a writer rather than interested in the genre. Most marketing is directed towards the genre and it's not directed towards the author at all. And I've learned the hard lesson that unfortunately these things don't cross-pollinate very well, right? People are really interested in my science fiction. They won't read a fantasy novel. People are really interested in fantasy. They're not reading a samurai novel. People who like the samurai novel are never reading anything else from me ever. That's okay. It's fine. But ultimately, that's what I prefer to do, is operate as an artist that does lots of different things. And that's just how I wish to do it. And so if I end up with a lesser earning business as a result, that's that. So you still publish things on Amazon. But there's other ways to make money in addition to that. There are crowdfunding things. That tends to be pretty big with graphic novels, is the crowdfunding, the whole crowdfunding thing. So you can crowdfund. Does crowdfunding necessarily make you more money? No, actually it doesn't. Because if you are crowdfunding and selling things with the same margin that you would sell through Amazon, over time it ends up being the same. The benefit to crowdfunding is you get a lump sum, which you can then use to buy all the things that you would need to make the product without having to drain your bank account. So that's really good. That means that you can also know what the demand is ahead of time for a book. So before you even write a book, you could crowdfund the idea to see if people want you to write it. Then you have all the money ahead of time to edit it, buy a cover from an artist, whatever you want to do. So I may crowdfund my next book, but it's already done and written. So it wouldn't do that, right? It wouldn't be for me to gauge the demand on the book, no matter what I'm coming out with the book. But it would be a way to get a lump sum so that I'm not having to take a loss on my taxes in case it doesn't recoup or something. Or I get the money to pay a cover artist now instead of paying him out of my savings and then hoping to make up the difference on the back end, if that makes any sense. So that's a big benefit to crowdfunding. You can make a little bit more margin in some cases. So if you are selling a digital product, the margin is higher because the fulfillment is possibly $0 to fulfill a digital item. Winter Sun just concluded a crowdfund for Time 2. Called the Time package. It's $50. What's on that $50 package? It's all digital, so they don't have to mail out anything. They just send you the digital product. It's the Time 2 album. It's the Time 1 remix. Then there's 5 demo albums, 5 extra albums. So you're getting 7 albums for $50, including 6 new ones. So you're getting 6 new ones and a remix of an older album for $50. Right? It's not going to cost them much to here's the link for you to download your stuff from Google Drive or something, or have some sort of way that gets distributed for very low expense to them. So if you're doing a digital product, like a crowdfund can be way higher margin. If you're getting 70% royalties from Amazon, you could be getting 100% royalties through the crowdfund, and possibly selling it at a higher initial cost to your fans. So like if I were to do it, I might do like, let's say I'm gonna sell King Leper, right? That's it's the mainline Eternal Dream books part 3. So I'll show you the first 2. Oh, I've got a big stack of all my books. Wrote a lot of books. Aren't I proud of myself? I am. I work hard. Here's the first 2 Eternal Dream books. Okay. So if I do a digital package for King Leper, which is not quite as long as both of those put together, but it's pretty long. I could do an Eternal Dream universe package that'll have these 2 books, all digital. These 2 books, the Moonsong series, all the Legends books, and the new book. And you sell that for like $25. You're like, you get all books in the series. You get 10 books for $25. That's a really high margin. I mean, that's as much as if they were to buy every single one of those books separately. But it feels like it's a nice big package. Or you sell it for like $20 or something like that. And so it costs me nothing to include the extra ebooks. Right? It doesn't actually cost me anything to include those. I can distribute them through BookFunnel, which I already pay for. So since it doesn't cost me anything extra, the margin is infinity, or the margin's 100%. So I get 100% margin on that stuff. And like if I'm selling to fans, a lot of them have already bought the books, but that doesn't really matter because the packages still might be appealing as a digital package. So if you're doing a digital package, margins are higher with crowdfunding. If you're doing a physical package, probably even, unless you're printing a huge volume. And then you're still you might be losing money on shipping. I talk to a lot of guys that lose money on their crowdfunding. Even when they meet hey, we met our goal. And then it's like, I lost $500 because I had to ship things to Estonia and it cost me $50 to ship the book to Estonia. It's a thing, right? So not always like you're going to make more money on crowdfunding, but it gives you that money up front, which you can use to not drain your bank account, which is really helpful. That means you're in the black. I love being just in the black with everything I do. Yeah, I don't like losing money or being in the red. So it can keep you out of the red. And when you're starting out as an author, that's really important because chances are if you're young, you don't have $10,000 in the bank to spend on a bunch of book crap, right? You need that money to live. So crowdfunds are good if you had it. The problem with crowdfunds, as I talked about, is it's a win more strategy. You have to have an audience that cares about you, that's willing to invest in your book in order for a crowdfund to work. You have to already have that. So how do you get that? Let me give you some tips. Here's how to build your audience as an author. Okay. Sorry, excuse me. Here's how to build your audience as an author. So the cheapest and most effective method is content marketing. For this, you have to have already written something to sell. So start by writing your book and publishing it, even though you won't make any money at the beginning. You'll build a small amount of audience from people like finding your book on Amazon, but really what we're trying to do is we're trying to get people from where they are, get their attention, and then hopefully funnel them into a product that you have for sale that's interesting to them. So content marketing is writing articles or making videos, making some kind of content that's related to your book and related to something that somebody who would buy your book would be interested in. I know that's a lot of degrees of separation, but like let's use a nonfiction example, diet books. So how do you sell a diet book? It's really easy. First, you write the diet book and you publish it. Then you make a bunch of videos on diets. That's not hard. So you go ahead and you're like, all right, here's a video, 12 foods to avoid to lose weight. Hey guys, if you found this interesting, here's my diet book. Let's go one deeper with the funnel. You also have private diet consulting. And so a customer watches your video, buys your diet book, and then books you for private consulting for like $50 a half hour. That's how you make money. So that is a big alternative then to trying to do this like writing fiction thing. Is if you're writing nonfiction, that's how you do it. You write a book that has a ton of information. You make free content that has some of that information and gets people to want to buy the book and get the deeper information. And then if that's useful, they want to go even deeper and hire your private lessons, your private consulting, whatever it is. It could be diet. It could be something else. It could be like an exercise routine. It could be speech therapy. It could be psychology. It could be any of those things. You can, psychology, book a session with me, right? You can do those things. For fiction, it would be something that's related to the genre that you're writing in. So let's say you write science fiction books. You're going to write an article about how new Star Wars sucks. I've done this. I made money doing this, okay? So I'm just telling you what I did, and you can do it too. And you don't even have to come up with new original things to say. You just do what most people did. Watch my videos and just say that shit on your channel, okay? Not hard, okay? You just take what I said and then synthesize it in your own way, put it on your article. You can even say, David Stewart said this, and I agree with him. And that's your article, okay? It could be fine. Okay, listen, it doesn't matter. So you make a thing on how Star Wars sucks, and then you're like, I'm a science fiction author, and here's my book. And here's all my science fiction books. And you just do that for a while, and you accumulate blog readers that then start to buy your books based on the quality of your blogs. And you can mix in some fiction samples in the blog. But the point is they have to be wanting to read it because they're already interested in something that you're saying. So writing serial fiction on your blog, the reason this doesn't work, and I know because I've tried it, is because people are not interested in your book. Rather, they already have interests, and you have to be giving them something in terms of the interests they already have. This is free though. So yeah, you can write an article on this sucks. Okay, write an article on how the Fallout TV series sucks, and here's 10 things they got wrong. Here's 10 pieces of lore the Fallout TV series gets wrong. Go make a video on this. You'll get like 50,000 views, and you hawk your book. You hawk your sci-fi book. Oh, I like the cut of this guy's jib. I'm going to click that link. I'm going to check out his sci-fi book. That's free market. Not only is it free marketing, you can make money on the ads. Boom. 2 sources of income in one go. So the book is monetizing the social media following a little bit, but what you're doing is you're building an audience the same way you would with an ad. It's with related targeting. It's targeted advertisement, only you're giving them entertainment and information for free. So you have to think like a marketer when you're doing this if you're going to do this approach. Now, I don't do this a lot. I talk about the shit that I want to talk about a lot, but it works, right? That's why so many people do it, because it works. So you can do that. Over time, you'll build up a pretty good little audience that may buy your books. It's free. It doesn't cost a lot of money. So that's how you gain the audience, is you have to be giving them something they already want. And if you're not doing that, then you need to be spending money on advertising your book. So you got to have money in the bank to do that. You have to be advertising what you're doing. You have to be like list trading with other authors, which I never do. I never trade my lists with other authors. That's like, I consider that bad. You know, if I see somebody that's traded lists and I get an email from an author that they did a list trade, I'm unsubscribing. It's like, I don't care about I don't care about your marketing emails anymore if you're going to list trade. Okay. I don't want a million emails from a bunch of authors that don't know me or care about me. Sorry. Anyway, so that's the way that you build an audience. You do it on social media. You make content that people like that's related to the things you do, and you build up an audience that's eventually interested in some of the things that you do. Not 100%. I have an audience of 50,000. Oh, you must be easy to make a bestseller. Not really, because of those 50,000 people, how many are interested in that book that I'm selling? The answer is a small amount. Right? A lot of them are interested in my culture war content. They don't really care that I wrote a high fantasy book about a king lover. They just don't care. It's okay. It's not for them. I don't want them to buy it if they're not going to enjoy it. Fine. No big deal. But if, I'll still sell some books because I have an audience, and that's good. That's the thing a lot of people have to think about. It's a long haul. So if you're doing the indie fiction thing, it's a long haul to get to the to get to the end. You are going to be doing this for a long time before you get enough attention and enough eyes and enough fans to where you can just sell a book without having to work hard for it. But while you're doing those things, you should be building up a back catalog of books so that people will buy stuff. Like, I sell pretty consistently across my catalog, not huge numbers, but people will go and buy things when I link them in my blog articles or I talk about them on the show. Like I say, you should buy Needle Ash, the complete edition, in hardback, available on Amazon.com. Great adventure novel. People buy one, and that's cool. So over time, you build up like this business where people are able to buy things. Everybody's expectations tend to be just a little bit misaligned with, they want success instantly. Sorry, success takes a long time to build up. So you have to be writing books, publishing them, writing articles, publishing them, meeting other people on social media and engaging with them. Those are the things that have to happen before you are going to be able to just have an audience. But if you're able to like traditionally publish, then that your book will get in front of more eyes of people that are only interested in books, which makes it a little easier to build an audience. The problem is like, let's say somebody buys your book but doesn't know who you are, like they just buy a book off Amazon. Are they gonna buy another book from you even if Amazon like gives them an alert? They may never buy another book from you because they don't really know you or care about you. They're not really plugged into what you're doing. But a fan that follows you on social media and is on your mailing list and reads your articles and liked 2 of your books, he might buy all of them, right? Like, I looked at a bunch of my recent reviews and they're all from the same guy. Like, he just read a book and just kept buying and reading my books and liking them all. Great, I love that. The guy's like a mega fan. I'm super happy to have him. That's awesome. Those don't just appear out of the mist like monkeys summoned by warlocks. You can't just cast a summoning spell and have an audience. It takes time to build it up no matter what you do. You can build it up by writing lots of books. You can build it up by writing lots of articles, combinations, making videos. I think it's a good idea to try as many things as you want. I'm going to be trying out a lot more shorts lately. I'm going to try an AI tool that will just take the stuff I say either on a live stream or a video and make a bunch of suggested 1-minute clips, and then I can quickly edit them and publish them and see if I can pull in more subscribers that are interested in the long form content, which is where I get to really know people because I can see them in the chat and I can interact with them. Like Cesar Perez, it's better to try and fail than to never trying at all. I now know that there's a person here named Cesar Perez. He has a history, he has a name, right? I can even guess some things about him based off his name, right? His name's Cesar. It's a good name, Caesar. Hail Caesar. That's the point of public schooling, the old man says. Misery porn. For whatever reason, that's what literature teachers really liked to teach when I was in school, and it seems like they haven't changed that much, except there's more of an emphasis on like intersectional representation in literature rather than here's a bunch of important writers from the first half of the 20th century that you now have to read. And because they're all basically atheists, everything they write about is horribly depressing. Okay. They're nihilists who hate life. It's like Ernest Hemingway. Why is Old Man in the Sea so depressing? This is a guy who committed suicide. Right? It's like, why is Nirvana's music depressing? Kurt Cobain was depressed, so he wrote depressing music. Right? Does Amazon's ban on authors reviewing each other mean my current Amazon book reviews could get me in trouble even if I'm published under a different name using a different account? Probably not. They'll probably never look into it. It probably doesn't matter that much. The worst that they usually do, like they will ban people for review trading. But here's how they find review trading is it's like really obvious that the accounts are reviewing each other. They have ways to figure that out. Chances are nothing bad would happen. The worst thing that could happen is that they would delete the review in most cases. Right. What can you guess about me, the old man? I can guess that you're old. Maybe you're a baby boomer. You're probably Gen X. Baby boomers hate to call themselves old, I've noticed. They're like, I'm not old. I'm only 68. Bro, that's old. To be fair, Robert E. Howard killed himself too. Yeah, his stuff is not nearly as depressing. But, my point is that, like, Ernest Hemingway didn't have this, like, sunny outlook on life. And Robert E. Howard didn't really either. His stuff can be pretty dark. But it's not like, I can't think of a really sunny, positive. J.R.R. Tolkien, his stuff's very uplifting. He had a very positive outlook. C.S. Lewis had a very positive outlook on life. So their stuff is not misery porn. It's not like, everything's bad. And there's no solution. There's no solution. You have to kill your friend. You have to kill your intellectually disabled friend because there's no peace in this world. Okay. That's a message, and I understand it. And it even resonates with me. It's not fun to read that, though. Kids don't like to read that. Wait, Mrs. Blanchard, I'm trying to figure out the message of this Steinbeck book. Should we kill everyone in the special ed class to make sure that they don't accidentally kill anyone? Like, a big Billy in the special ed class sat on another kid and hurt him. We should probably kill Billy, right? There's no saving him because he's intellectually disabled. Or no, our life is going to be misery forever because he's too stupid to be able to take with me. So I'm just going to kill him, shoot him in the back of the head while he tells me about rabbits. While I tell him about the rabbits that we're going to have. Let him live that dream while I murder him. They have school children read this. Lovely, lovely ending. Lovely ending. I'd rather read a real tragedy. See, that's not even a tragedy. It's not like a downfall of a noble character. It doesn't fit the archetype of a tragedy at all. It's a totally modern nihilistic, like, depression fest of Mice and Men. Right? Like, it's not like the noble character has a chance to redeem himself and has a moral failing that drags him down to hell, like Macbeth or Brutus in Julius Caesar or something like that, right? It's not that. Tell me about the rabbits, George. No. Yeah, I'm going to have you die happy because I think it's good to euthanize people. You put him down like a dog. He's stupid like a dog, and we're going to kill him like a dog. Your channel's probably mostly composed of Gen X and Y fans. Yeah, I think so. But I know there's a lot of, like, Zoomers out there. I have a lot of hope that the youth, I think the youth will be really good. I think Gen Z is actually going to turn out to be, like, a pretty hopeful generation, like, once they can shake off kind of the badness of social media from their formative years. And they may end up being really, really, I think it's going to be a good generation. Whereas, like, Gen Y is like these navel-gazing nostalgia addicts. I wrote a whole book about it. Afterglow. It's in here somewhere. I wrote a whole book about it. Here it is. I wrote a whole book about it. Afterglow. Crippling clinical nostalgia. Inability to move forward with life. Always looking backwards. Always remembering a childhood you can never return to and that you can't give to your children because it's too expensive and because society's been destroyed by your parents. That's Gen Y. What's Gen Z? Gen Z is already inheriting, like, ruins. There's only positive things to do from there. I feel like my generation's really kid-focused. Like, those of us who had kids who weren't convinced by the anti-natalists that kids were awful, like our boomer parents telling us, like, imagine how much better my life would have been if I hadn't had you. Thanks, Dad. Thanks. I wish I never married your mom. So you wish I wasn't born? It's like, well, I'd be richer. Yeah, thanks. My rent is $3,000 a month. And your house is paid off. And you paid $17,000 for it. Anyway, yeah. Like, it's really crippling for my generation. Like, no savings, nowhere to go, completely treading water, miserable about life, running out of time, not willing to, like, do the hard work required to shake off the chains and, like, do things. But I've noticed that, like, Gen X really Gen Y and millennials having kids, like the kids are really important. Like the love of children is just overwhelming in a lot of people from my generation, because they realize it's like their childhood, and you go up and reflect on your childhood. Like my childhood was good and bad. It was good in all of these amazing ways, and it was really bad in the ways that my parents kind of forced certain things on me and ignored me in other ways. That's a really common experience for my generation. So that turns you into someone who's like, well, I'm really going to make sure that my kids are going to do really good. I'm going to focus on my kids a lot. So Gen Z, it's going to be something similar to that, which is like they're going to be a really eventually economically explosive generation once they kind of come into their own. It's like they're forming, their formative young adulthood years are like, this is awful. Like it's the people who were 20 in 1933. That's brutal, man. That's tough. But those people became like uber rich as well. Do you think there's a place for depressing media or not at all, really? I think there is, totally. But we got to think about, like, what are we making our kids read? What are we making a 13 and 14, or I guess probably more like 14-year-olds. I read it as a freshman in high school. I think I read Mice and Men. And I was like, this is awful, right? And I couldn't express that, or I'd get an F on my paper. I couldn't express, this is an awful book. It was boring and really bad. Everything turns out bad. Not just no happy ending, but no meaning to the ending. The ending doesn't give you any kind of tragic catharsis. It's just like, shoot him. Shoot Lenny. Gen Y is also infected with the cynical bug. Yeah. Hard to find creatives not with a dystopian story. Yeah, everything has to be like uber, because we grew up with that. We had that forced on us. I think there's a place for depressing media, depressing songs. It's whatever you want to do, but I don't know about forcing children to read it. They had us read The Fault in Our Stars when I was a freshman. I don't know if I read this. Let me figure out who wrote this. The Fault in Our Stars. Who wrote it? John Green. So this is a newer one. I never read it. I have no reason to read it. Plot. Someone dies of cancer. Cancer is bad and sad. Read this book about it. I'm so glad that we read a book about people dying of cancer. There's so much, right? And the thing is, you can make a book about cancer really meaningful, right? Like we have hagiographies about saints dying painful deaths. Is that depressing? No, it's about the heroic. It's about the heroic struggle. That's how a lot of that stuff is, right? 300. Does that 300 have a depressing ending? Kind of, right? Leonidas dies. The bold 300 die. The brave 300 die. They die fighting their last. But their death has meaning. Their death has purpose. They are dying for something important. Even though they're failing in one way, they're succeeding in another way. That's a hagiographic thing with saints as well. It's like the saint is martyred. The martyrdom is not a failure of the saint, right? That's his triumph in a way. That's him giving everything, right? Him dying for something more important than his own pleasure. Anyway, I think I'm running out of time. I'm gonna let that book sit on Vela for another couple of days, and we'll upload it on maybe either whenever I do another stream, maybe Friday, and then I'll do a live write on Saturday. I usually like to do the second half of these as live writes, but there's just so much to talk about, right? There's just so many like publishing topics to talk about. Let me do a quick review before I go here. So, traditional publishing, the model is you find an agent, you query agents, an agent agrees to rep your book to publishers, the publisher publishes it, and they handle all of the publishing pipeline. They'll edit, They'll hire the editor. They'll do the cover. They'll print. They'll distribute. You don't have to worry about it. You don't have to think that much about that stuff. They're the experts. They'll do all that. They'll also pay for it. Because they pay for it, you're not going to make a lot of royalties. You may get an advance on the royalties because that's kind of standard practice, but you won't get paid any extra royalties until your side of the royalties completely fulfills that advance. So if it's a $5,000 advance, you have to make $5,000 in royalties before you earn another dime past the advance. The downside of that is there's potential for more money in indie fiction, and you can also actually release your book. You can release in more niche genres. You can release a book when you are part of a hated class, like a Christian white male. You can still publish if you go indie. Whereas that may be something that is a barrier nowadays, is just being from a certain race or religion. Maybe a big character block. There are real social costs to being a Christian in modern America, and there's social costs to being white as well, major social costs. So that can hold you back as well. But that's what you have to do, and if no one wants to rep it, then you want to get your book published, in which case you can go independent. Okay, independent publishing, you do everything. You write the book, you hire the editor or edit the book yourself, you make the cover, or you hire a cover artist yourself. That means you have to have enough aesthetic valuing to know what to hire for a cover. You have to know enough about the genre you're writing in to have an appropriate genre cover. You have to have a lot of extra knowledge to do the indie publishing thing, but you can publish a lot more diverse kinds of stories. There's no one to tell you no, and you get to keep all the money for yourself. I don't think that's my insurance company calling to tell me, we're giving you money for your house that got destroyed. Anyway, so you get to keep all the money, but you have to do all the work. Okay. You have to make the cover. You have to figure out the keywords. You have to figure out the categories. You have to figure out how to advertise if you're going to advertise, where you're going to advertise, on Amazon, on Facebook, on Twitter, how you're going to do content marketing, like I talked about, how you're going to target the genre if you want to write to market. All those things you have to learn about as an indie fiction writer. I think they're fun to learn about, and I've learned about them, and I share all my lessons with you guys for free. I don't charge a dime to give you this information because I want other people to succeed. It's really important to me that people don't lose their ass paying for author services that they don't understand, don't have value, and also that people don't lose their ass. Maybe buying a $1,500 cover for a book that is not going to sell well because it's not in like a hot enough genre or something like that. So you want to be you get to keep all the money, but you have to learn all the lessons along the way as well. The traditional model with that is the 20 books to 50K, which is what I see most successful indie authors doing. Write a very long series in a targeted genre niche and hit those tropes. Write them medium-length books and hope that you get a sell-through. Focus all of your marketing efforts on book one, and ideally people will continue buying the books all the way through the series. So as you continue working, you continue adding books to that series, and it builds up the brand. Okay, so the brand is focused on the series and not really on the author. That's the other thing too. And then you can use neo-patronage models, which is what I use. You can gather fans by making lots of content for them and publishing lots of books they might like. You can write books for those fans, for those patrons. You can crowdfund those books to offset the capital cost of buying a cover, hiring an editor, those sorts of things. Really can be helpful. The other thing you can do is you can, with that neo-patronage model, get monthly subscribers, give them value, right? If you are on my Patreon, you get a free book every month. This month, it's going to be a couple weeks for the month for this book to come, but it's going to be at least book one of Leper King. Leper King is actually 3 books. Probably going to release it as one like big fat book because I just want to do that. I want a doorstopper, baby. But I'll give you at least the first third this month, but it'll take me a while to get the files and everything prepped because I'm still working on like revisions and all kinds of other little things, and I haven't drawn a map, so I got to do a live map draw for that, all that kind of stuff. So anyway, yes, you can use neo-patronage to do that, to get a little bit more like passive income with that while still giving value. If you have a big back catalog like me, you can get free books. If you don't have a big back catalog, you can offer a lot of other extra benefits, like access to you or whatever whatever other kind of things you want. So yeah, you get a free book every month through Patreon. So join my Patreon, get a free book every month. It rotates. It's a different book. And you always get Keys to Prolific Creativity to help you establish your creative process and write your own books or make your own music, whatever it's going to be. So anyway, those are the overview of all the models. And I've talked about everything and everyone in there. In trad publishing, you're only supposed to write one genre per pen name, and your agent may only want to rep one of your genres. That's true. At least traditionally. If you're Stephen King, you can do whatever you want, but he was forced to write with a second pen name, Richard Bachman, because he wrote too many books. It wasn't because they were super far outside the genre. He wrote fantasy books as Stephen King, but it was because he wrote. The traditional belief was readers would only read one book per year per author. So he was writing like 3 books per year, so he had to adopt a pen name for that. So anyway, there you go. That's it. I'm befuddled why so many people see the cynical, subversive 1970s era of movies like Taxi Driver as the greatest era of film and want it to come back. Those people fawned over Joker. I think it's because sometimes that cynicism feels like it has depth. It feels like it has depth. Taxi Driver is interesting. We can look at that one sometime. I don't think it's like quite as nihilistic as like Cool Hand Luke or something like that. But you're right. There was this sort of depressing to 70s movies that I think a lot of people were really excited to not have that in the 80s. The 80s is all about high concept, good times. Back to the Future, Star Wars, right? Really fun things. And the 70s tends to be about auteurs making movies about more depressing things. And that's coming out of the 60s. Like, these things come in cycles. The 60s was all about 3D movies and like hype and hammering genres home, those sorts of stuff. It's all about gimmicks. That kind of died because television was killing the movie industry by a lot of beliefs at the time. So they started trying to make movies more artistic, and that's what we got. We got movies that kind of encapsulated the time, which tended to be somewhat nihilistic. The 80s was about the high concept blockbuster. The 90s was still about that to a certain extent, and then we started getting gimmicks again. 3D movies came back in a big way in the late 2000s. So these things come in cycles. Kind of interesting to think about. Sometimes it's depth. Some people think it's just telling a realistic story. In other words, it's something for adults. Yeah. I think Godfather is good, but it is not. It is a tragic story, not a nihilistic one. The tragedy is about the moral downfall of Michael Corleone. Going from somebody who had the capacity to escape from the wickedness of his family and instead became the most wicked person in it. Interesting story. So I think that's about it for today. I'll put the book up on Amazon on another stream if people are interested in that, either next week or on Friday or Saturday. So have a great one, and I'll see you all next time. Don't forget to join. You can hop on my Patreon. Let me make sure I didn't miss any other chats here. Here we go. I'm going to link my Patreon. I'm having like bad allergies right now too, so I need to get off and figure out how to deal with that. Yeah, or Ko-Fi, right? Ko-Fi also works. Also, Substack. If you want to read any of the live writes, they are always on Substack as well. Right now, we're working on a young adult fantasy novel. I'm using young adult broadly. It's really for kids, but we're going to call it young adult because if you market it specifically for kids, that can mess everything up. So you just say young adult for everything. Yeah. Anyway, check that out. Where's the music only channel? Here. We'll listen to this one. Boop, boop, boop. There's a video. Yeah. Even something really dark. Think of something like Berserk. If you read the Berserk manga, there's Puck, the fairy. What's Puck the fairy doing here? He's keeping it from getting too dour, from getting too just horribly dark and depressing because of like the struggle that Guts is having. And so Guts is this dark guy, and then you have Puck kind of trying to lighten things up and see the bright side. They generally cut him out of like the anime stuff, but I think he's kind of an important little addition to the manga. So anyway, just a thought. Have a great one, guys. I'll see you all next time. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe, and have a great day. I didn't miss any super chats, did I? There's no super chats. Man, nobody's giving me money today. I didn't get any money. Have a good one, guys. I'll see you next time.